Part 48. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 471. But she didn't know at that time that what he wanted was never power and status. He worked hard to make himself strong and never let go of any opportunity to temper himself. He practiced martial arts day and night, followed her in handling government affairs, learned the imperial power bit by bit, and climbed to the pinnacle of power step by step, just to have an upright person standing beside her. Opportunities all around. Later, all the power and powerful martial arts were used to deal with the emperor's husband. It's just that a person's power is limited. He could be ruthless to anyone, he could do anything to get rid of his love rival, he could make the imperial wife's plans fail time and time again, and she could not set foot in the harem for several years. But in the end, he still lost to his own weakness. She was a woman born for the common people in the world. From the day she came to power, she was destined to be unable to have a complete love. What he wanted was too extravagant and she couldn't afford it. But he was so paranoid, he wanted to monopolize her crazily, not allowing anyone to share her feelings, not allowing anyone to get her attention, even if they were just a couple in name only. He couldn't tolerate it. He wanted her to have only him in her eyes and heart. He longed to dominate her body and mind, get all her attention, and didn't want her eyes to stay on other men, not even a little bit. The royal wives hated him and were hostile to him, and wanted to get rid of him quickly. The ministers were afraid of him and surrounded him, trying to pull him down from his high position at all costs. His existence, his uncontrollable emotional obsession, the crazy jealousy that gradually grew in his heart, the hatred towards the royal husband and family, and the murderous intention that he tried to restrain but finally broke out of the cage because of the death of his son, finally made him become like a murderous demon. The country were stable because of her, but in the end they were destroyed beyond recognition by him. The government was in chaos because of him. The 4 royal husbands were eliminated one by one, and the interests of the families behind them were greatly damaged. It was rare for the major families in the court who were originally competing against each other to be so united. They joined forces to accuse him and force the queen to give them an explanation. Rong Huijin, who had never regretted anything he did, finally felt regretful when Danju was forced by the officials. Her Majesty the Queen, who had always been calm and self-possessed, finally lost control and collapsed because of the suicide of that person who shouldered all the blame. Perhaps the only time we truly let go of the shackles of identity and were honest with each other was during those months when we were finally bedridden to recuperate. However, the love at that time was no longer accompanied by joy and happiness, but was filled with sorrow and regret, filled with the separation of life and death, of grief and grief. In the silent night, a low sigh overflowed from the lips, as if crossing the distance between heaven, earth, mountains, and sea, returning to those unforgettable years. 11 Rong Yu, who has sharp senses, caught even the slightest abnormality in his breathing in time. Are you awake? The high-hanging 9-branch dragon-patterned lamp illuminates the deep palace hall. The hanging cloud curtain next to the dragon pillar blocks the bright light on the bed, allowing people who have been tired for a day to get a better sleep. Nan 11 turned her head and looked at Rong Yu sitting by the bed. Rong Yu, who was hidden in the dim light, was looking at her without blinking an eye. His normally dignified face was visibly full of haggard and care, and his strong and trim hands were still holding her hands steadily. Apparently he stayed here all night without a sleep. Nan 11 couldn't help but sigh. Why don't you come up and take a rest? I just want to look at you. Rong Yu held her hand and kissed the back of her hand. How are you? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Your Majesty. Yunya came in with 2 medical girls and saluted respectfully. This slave has to clean and change His Majesty's clothes. Your Majesty, please stay out of the way. Rong Yu was silent for a moment. Didn't you just scrub it? A woman who has just given birth is weak and sweats a lot. She needs to be scrubbed and changed more frequently, Yunya said in a tactful tone. a medical woman is better at taking care of these things than a palace official, so I would like to ask the prince to step aside. Nan 11 smiled lightly, go ahead, it will be inconvenient for you to stay here. Rong Yu pursed her lips, hummed quietly, then stood up and walked out without saying a word. The young prince is in the side hall. Yin Yu served Nan 11 and reported the young master's situation in a low voice. The eldest princess and the wet nurse are taking care of her over there. The slaves saw that the young master is so handsome, with very similar facial features. Your Majesty, you are born with the noble spirit of a king. Standing in the outer hall, Rong Yu naturally heard Yin Yu's words and couldn't help but become suspicious again. Is his son really that good looking? There's nothing wrong with the eyes between mother-in-law and Yin Yu. He just said that his son looked like him just casually. After all, his son was ugly and definitely didn't look like 11er, but he actually didn't know who his son looked like at all. But Yin Yu told 11er with certainty that his son looked like him. Why didn't he see the resemblance? Also naturally noble. With such a small face and a languid look, how can you tell that he is born with nobility? Rong Yu thought to himself and decided to discuss this issue with 11er tomorrow. White fish belly gradually appears in the east. Rong Yu returned to the inner hall, and Nan 11 said, is the morning court time coming soon? Rong Yu made the decision without thinking, we will rest today. Nan 11 let him go, with a gentle curve on her lips, Yu, what do you think is a good name for your son? Rong Yu kissed her fingers, like a cat craving for warmth, you decide. Rong Yu. Nan 11 spoke softly, do you think the fate of Queen Dongling can be lifted by me? Rong Yu was startled when he heard this, 11er. It's really tiring for a woman to be an emperor. Nan 11 smiled lightly, I can't love the one I love, and I can't balance responsibility and emotion. If I want to give up one, I will inevitably hurt the other. It's really a bit difficult to force others. It's hard to hurt the one you love. It's even more dereliction of duty for a monarch to hurt the people of the world. It's easy to say that it's easy to balance the two, but only those who are in it know how difficult it is. Rong Yu was slightly shocked and silent for a long time. I won't make you tired again. They used to be too cautious, and now this way can better protect their feelings, which will neither let down the people nor cast a shadow of anxiety on their feelings. He will protect her well, protect the Dongling Shiji, return the century of prosperity she owes, and make up for the big mistakes he made because of his paranoia and unscrupulous means. Rong Yu didn't ask her if she had recovered her memory, because this question was no longer important. The knots that once entangled their hearts, the obsessions that they could not let go of, and the paranoia that they could not get rid of like a demon, will all slowly fade away. In the days to come, the haze will dissipate and the spring sun will shine. Only light and beauty are the precious things they must protect. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 472. At dawn, Nan 11 was in better spirits and ordered, let the nurse bring the child to me. Rong Yu paused for a moment with an undetectable expression, and couldn't help but worry, would 11er be disappointed when she saw the child's appearance? What's wrong? Nan 11 looked at him puzzledly. Rong Yu shook his head, turned around and ordered Yin Yu to bring the little prince over. Not long after, Yin Yu brought the little guy who had just fallen asleep from the side hall and placed him next to Nan 11. The sleeping face of the child looked even more peaceful and harmless, and very cute. Nan 11 looked at her son's face, and a gentle smile rose unconsciously at the corner of her lips. My son is really good looking, and he really looks more like his father. Rong Yu was quietly watching Nan 11's expression, fearing that she would be disappointed with her son's appearance. She didn't expect to hear such words, and was surprised for a moment. 11er. Nan 11 raised her eyes, Rong Yu hesitated, do you think he is good looking too? Of course, Nan 11 said, and couldn't help kissing her son's cheek. How could our son not be good looking? Rong Yu was silent. Is it really his eyes that have problems? What's the name of the child? Xianyuan 11 came over. Have you two thought about it? Rong Yu didn't speak. How Nan 11 asked Rong Yu for his opinion. Use the name Xianyuan Hao in the royal family genealogy, and call it Rong Hao when you go back to Dezhou. Anyway, no matter what it is called, it is her and Rong Yu's child, but since it is going to inherit Dongling Zhongshan, it must be crowned with the surname of the Dongling royal family. Rong Yu nodded. I'll listen to you. Xianyuan 11 thought about it for a while, but he didn't have any objections. This name was the most suitable for the emperor. So the name was decided, casually as if it was a simple matter. On the same day, the imperial edict was issued to establish a crown prince. The empress gave birth to a prince smoothly, and the whole court celebrated. There was a joyous atmosphere inside and outside the palace. What was even more exciting was that the day after the prince was born, the regent ordered someone to announce the empress's will and appoint the eldest son Xianyuan Hao as the crown prince to bring peace to the world. Since the founding of the Dongling dynasty, this was the first prince who was appointed as the crown prince as soon as he was born, especially since the empress had just ascended the throne. The emperor was only 17 years old and the crown prince was appointed, which was rare since ancient times. But the court officials were still happy. Because the female ruler of the world means something different to them, especially the empress of this generation is weak in temperament, and the power is controlled by the regent, whose power is completely above all the powerful ministers. This is undoubtedly a weakening of power for the major families. The regent came from the great Zhou dynasty, got married first, and occupied the harem alone. The gentle and traditional empress completely obeyed the regent's orders, so that the harem was vacant, and the interests between the monarch and the ministers could not be balanced, which naturally caused dissatisfaction. But in front of the absolutely powerful regent, almost no one dared to express this dissatisfaction. Although the enthronement of the crown prince does not mean the transfer of monarchy, it at least adds a psychological expectation and comfort to the ministers, although this comfort is actually meaningless at the moment. After February, the weather is getting warmer and warmer, and the flowers are blooming, and the air is filled with refreshing fragrance. Her Majesty is weak after giving birth and needs to rest, and all government affairs are fully responsible by the regent. However, the regent was also busy taking care of Nan 11, who was almost always by her side, so Prime Minister Xie, Prime Minister Lu and some central ministers in the court were particularly busy these 2 days, sharing the worries of the emperor at critical moments and fulfilling their duties, so that the regent could accompany the emperor with peace of mind and take care of the empress who had just given birth to a prince. Xie Jin, the most popular person in front of the emperor, directly took the position of the chief steward in front of the emperor, running back and forth, responsible for entering the palace to pay respects every day, reporting government affairs and military intelligence, and occasionally seeing the little prince. Xianyuan Hua and Xianyuan Chen, the imperial study room attendants, were responsible for screening intelligence memorials. Except for some important matters that must be reviewed by the regent, almost all other matters that could be handled by Xie Jin were pushed to Xie Jin. Those that Xie Jin could not handle were conveyed to his father and the prime minister. Xianyuan Yao communicated and discussed matters in the military camp with Prime Minister Xie. In short, when power was decentralized, if you could avoid bothering the regent, you must not seek a sense of existence in front of the regent. Increasing the chance to show up in an extraordinary period does not mean that you will be promoted step by step. Instead, if you handle things in an orderly manner and let the regent have no worries, you will be appreciated and reused. Everyone strictly abides by the rules, except Jeanruo who does his own thing. This little face is so beautiful. Jeanruo held the little prince in his arms, and couldn't help poking the little cutie's white and tender face with his fingers. It's really your Majesty's child. This delicate and noble outline is almost exactly the same as your Majesty's. In Jeanruo's eyes, the child born by Nan 11 naturally looks like Nan 11, and it has nothing to do with other people. However, when this was said, the princess was surprised. Is there anything wrong with the little prince's eyes? Hauer's facial features are exactly the same as the regent, almost carved from the same mold, noble and natural. How do you think he looks like your majesty? Jean Rouault was silent for a moment. Naturally, he couldn't be too rude to the princess. He just muttered in a low voice, I still think Hauer looks like your majesty. The dragon and phoenix are true, and your majesty is a natural emperor. This little prince looks like your majesty, of course he is noble. How can he be noble and natural like the regent? Xianyuan 11 was speechless when he heard this. How can he be noble and natural like the regent? This question is so cute. What she meant is that Hauer looks like Rong Yu, and his nobleness and elegance are just his temperament. What does the Yu Kingdom prince want to refute? From his tone, it seems that he has some special relationship with 11er, but he is hostile to the regent. Xianyuan 11 was suspicious and couldn't help but wonder if the Yu Kingdom prince liked 11er and wanted to become 11er's husband. The little prince does look like the regent. The nurse smiled and took Hauer from Jean Rouault's arms, but it is more of a fusion of the regent and the queen's respective advantages, just like the princess said, with a natural nobleness. Jean Rouault was not convinced. Obviously he looks like your majesty. The nurse looked at him in surprise, not understanding why his attitude was so strange. But she was just a nurse, adhering to the rule of doing more and talking less, and took the little prince to feed behind the screen. Jean Rouault actually wanted to come and see Nan 11, but Nan 11 was in confinement, so it was inconvenient. He could only come and see the little prince every day to comfort him. The side hall was separated from the main hall by only a door. Rong Yu could hear Jean Rouault and the wet nurse talking clearly, but he didn't react. Instead, Nan 11 laughed. Is there something wrong with Jean Rouault's eyes? Hauer obviously looks more like you. My mother and the wet nurse said so. I also think he looks like you. But he always insists on his own opinion and insists that he looks like me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 473. Rong Yu didn't care and couldn't help but kiss her finger. You gave birth to my son, and he should be just like you. When Nan 11 heard this, she couldn't help but be even more surprised. That's not what you said the first day. Rong Yu's expression paused. How should he tell 11er that the first day was because the child was really ugly, and he couldn't tell who it looked like at all, but the child belonged to both of them, so he couldn't say that it didn't look like either of them. That's why he said he looked like himself. But as the eldest princess said, the facial features of a newborn baby have not grown yet, and wrinkles are normal. Over the past few days, the baby has been the same every day. He eats when he is full, sleeps when he wakes up, eats when he wakes up, and his little face is so pink. Yes, the longer it gets, the better it looks. The skin is as fair and supple as a porcelain doll. Except for Jean Rouault, who refused to admit it, all the people who had seen it said that His Highness looked exactly like the regent, that he was carved from the same mold. Only then did Rong Yu realize that there was indeed something wrong with his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said calmly, "It's our child anyway, it doesn't matter who he looks like." Nan 11 looked at him thoughtfully. Ew. Rong Yu's heart skipped a beat, and his voice became deeper. Huh. Don't you like children? Rong Yu was stunned and shook his head subconsciously. How could it be? Of course I like our children. Really? Nan 11 smiled lightly. I didn't see it. Rong Yu's voice was soft. You gave birth to her, how could I not like it? Nan 11 leaned on the head of the bed, her eyes calm, and she just looked at him without saying a word. Rong Yu felt stressed by her sight, and she pursed her lips slightly, telling the truth. When I saw him the first day, I thought he looked a little strange. Looks weird? Nan 11's expression was subtle. She did hear Rong Yu ask her mother about the child's appearance, but she didn't care at the time. Now that she thought about it, did Rong Yu think the child was ugly? No wonder when she asked the child who he looked like, he hesitated before saying he looked like him. Nan 11 found it funny. The regent who is decisive in killing turns out to have such a silly side. But it's not surprising. She smiled faintly. The child has been in the belly for 9 months. It has been soaked in the mother's amniotic fluid for a long time, and the skin will wrinkle or even peel. Before birth, the baby is curled up in the mother's body. After birth, it becomes serious. There is a possibility of redness and deformation, and it will become normal after a few days. With that said, she told Yunyu to bring Hao over. Yunyu quickly went to the side hall, picked up the little guy and placed it beside Nan 11. After blessing her body, she turned around and walked out. Nan 11 looked down at her son's beautiful and cute face, was silent for a moment, and then said calmly, "This child looks very similar to Jingye. I feel that God has given the child back to us." Rong Yu was startled. 11 Jingye was the child who died in their previous life. Nan 11 lowered her head and kissed her son's little face. Her voice was calm and soft. Jingye looked like this when he was just a few days old. Rong Yu said nothing. When Jingye was just born, too many things happened in the palace. Dansha dragged her weak body after giving birth to reprimand the courtiers. In the next few days, she had to deal with the aftermath. Rong Huijin, who had piled up political affairs in the palace, moved all the affairs to the palace to deal with them. From early morning at night, I have to deal with all kinds of things outside, and I have almost no time to pay attention to my children. When Danshu was in confinement, Jingyi stayed with her for a month, and was taken care of by the wet nurse thereafter. However, Rong Huijin only saw the child very rarely. At that time, all his thoughts were on Danshu, and the inner palace Pilshu was weak and needed to rest. He was worried, and there were royal wives and ministers outside. He was busy dealing with the overt and covert hostility of the major families. It wasn't until Danshu was out of confinement and stabilized the court, and all the messy things inside and outside Dongling were settled, that they had the energy to focus on their children. But at that time, the child was already 8 or 9 months old and had reached the stage of babbling. In fact, even if all external factors are put aside, Rong Huijin's attitude towards the child in his previous life was not very warm. He was not a good father. Until the child died due to palace intrigues, he barely held him a few times. His own biological son. The inner hall was silent for a moment. "Do you want to hug him?" Nan 11 raised her eyes and looked at Rong Yu with a smile. "While he is still young, you should give him more hugs. When he can walk and talk, he probably won't live such a leisurely and happy life." Rong Yu didn't say anything. He picked up the child and put it on his lap. He reached out and poked his son's face. "How it really looks like Jingye." Like Nan 11 nodded, "But this is normal. After all, our appearance has not changed much. If the child looks like you, it will not change much." Rong Yu hummed, then narrowed his eyes and looked at his son's obsidian-like clean and ignorant eyes. "I will protect him well." Nan 11 smiled slightly. "Of course you have to protect it, otherwise who will you leave your country to?" Rong Yu raised his eyes and looked at her without saying a word, with deep emotion in his eyes. "Actually, if we don't come back, it would be good to stay in Dazhu," Nan 11 said with a smile on her lips. "The child can be named Rong and directly inherit the kingdom of Dazhu. When the world is unified, the co-owner of the 9 states will be Rong. The surname is royal family, not Xianyuan." Rong Yu said, "It doesn't matter what his last name is, as long as you know whose bloodline he continues." "But this is unfair to you," Nan 11 sighed. "The Xianyuan family doesn't deserve what you do. As long as you're worth it." Rong Yu's voice was soft. "In the final analysis, everything I did was not for the Xianyuan family. Nan 11 hummed, and did not argue about this anymore. She said calmly, let's go to court tomorrow. Since you have taken on this responsibility, you must do your part. The decentralization of power cannot become a habit, otherwise it will easily cause trouble. I know wrong, you nodded, but there is no problem for the time being. Wait until you are out of confinement before going. Nan 11 frowned subconsciously when she heard this. Wrong Yu pursed his lips, there is nothing particularly important to do in court for the time being. Who said there is nothing? Nan 11 raised his eyebrows slightly, have you forgotten that this year is the first year after ascending the throne? This is the time to prepare for the spring examination. Have you asked people to prepare? Wrong Yu was silent for a long time, 11er. Wrong Yu frowned slightly, I'm a little uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with what? Nan 11 raised the corners of his lips a little, and there was a mischievous smile in his eyes. Are you not used to the tone of my voice? Wrong Yu nodded. Then why are you trying to wake up my memory? Nan 11 said in a leisurely tone, why do you come here? Wrong Yu was speechless. If you dwell too much on some things, you will easily get yourself trapped, Nan 11 said, you have to learn to let go of the past. Let the past go. If you keep thinking about it, how hard will your life be? I can't let go of loving you. Wrong Yu shook his head, I am willing to suffer a little. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 474. Nan 11 knew his temper, so she didn't try to persuade him too much. Many things can't be persuaded by words, and it takes time to fade. The spring examination should have been decided in February, but now it's already March, and there's still no outcome. Nan 11 smiled lightly, do you think you, the regent, have failed in your duties? Wrong Yu lowered his eyes and looked at his son. The little guy was already asleep, sleeping soundly and cutely. He called Yan Yu and asked her to take the child to the small bed in the side hall to sleep. After Yan Yu took the child away, he whispered, I failed in my duties. Your Majesty, are you going to punish me? How? Wrong Yu's attitude was particularly obedient, no matter how your Majesty deals with me, I am willing to accept it without any complaints. Really? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, then punish you to sleep on the bed for 4 hours. Yes, your Majesty. Wrong Yu smiled softly, took her hand and kissed it on his lips, I obey your order. After saying that, he really cooperated very well and took off his boots and got on the bed, holding her in his arms. I've been exhausted these past 2 days. Nan 11 stroked his eyebrows and eyes, as if to wipe away the tiredness. Don't torture yourself anymore in the future. I told you to rest well a long time ago, but you never listened. I've slept enough these past 2 days, and I always have nightmares. Wrong Yu said in a low voice, you used to dream a lot, but these 2 days it's my turn. Nan 11 was silent, what did you dream about? A lot. Wrong Yu stretched out his hand to hook her hair, wrapping it around his fingertips in circles, good and bad, happy and sad, intermittent, very messy. Nan 11 couldn't sit for a long time during the confinement period, so she lay down soon. Wrong Yu followed her and lay down, holding her in his arms and not wanting to let her go. Even though they had been married for a year, he still couldn't help but be greedy for this kind of warmth that could bring him a sense of security. You're so close, aren't you afraid that the smell of my sweat will suffocate you? Nan 11 teased. Women after childbirth sweat a lot, and drinking a cup of hot water can make them sweat all over. Wrong Yu smiled and said, I only smelled the fragrance on your body. Your nose is problematic. Yes, your Majesty is right. Wrong Yu obeyed unconditionally, without any resistance. Didn't your Majesty punish me to sleep? Nan 11 also explained, if the matter of the spring examination is arranged earlier, the 2 tutors around you will have a legitimate opportunity to enter the officialdom. And Xiejian, even if he runs errands more times, Everyone in the imperial capital knows that he is a favorite of the emperor, but after all, he has no official title, and it is inevitable that people will not accept it. Rong Yu smiled softly, I understand. Nan 11 glared at him. Rong Yu did understand that he had been a powerful official for 2 lifetimes, and in this life he was the regent of the Great Zhou and Dongling countries. What kind of things in the court did he not know? It's just that he has been around Nan 11 for the past 2 days, and all the affairs in the court have been left to the ministers who are more capable and do more work. The palace examination needs to be presided over by the Empress and the regent personally. The time for the entrance examination has not been determined, and Prime Minister Lu can't make the decision on his own. Nan 11 knows this, so she reminded him not to forget this important matter. Rong Yu agreed and promised to explain it early tomorrow morning. Nan 11 let him go. Rong Yu couldn't help but sigh secretly. Her Majesty's majesty is back, and her innate sense of responsibility has obviously returned with it. Should he be happy or sad? There is an aristocratic academy called Yulin in the capital of Dongling. Although there is no explicit regulation, this name was given by the ancestor emperor. For 100 years, it has mostly trained talents for the court. Only the children of the powerful and noble families in the imperial capital are qualified to study there. Xiejin once studied in Yulin Academy for 2 years, but he was young and smart, knowledgeable and talented, and was considered a leader among students. He didn't go there much after he was 15 years old. The spring examination in February happened to coincide with the birth of the prince by the empress. The regent was so focused on the empress that the spring examination was delayed. Fortunately, Prime Minister Lu was very capable. Before the regent issued an order, he reminded the respected teachers in the Imperial Academy to prepare a list in advance, so that students who were qualified and confident this year would have the opportunity to participate in the spring examination. This would prevent them from being in a hurry and not even having time to prepare their homework. As the son of Prime Minister Xiejin also needed to go through this stage if he wanted to officially enter the government. In addition to Xiejin, royal relatives and children of the rich and powerful who did not have the title of king or marquis were also eligible to sign up for the entrance examination held by the court. If they could stand out in the examination, they would naturally be qualified to enter the government. Because this is the first year of the Empress's accession to the throne, and also the first time to hold an imperial examination after her accession to the throne, the process is simpler than before, and some unnecessary restrictions have been cancelled. Of course, it is also because it is an exception. At the beginning of the new emperor's accession to the throne, it is necessary to select talented and learned children from aristocratic families to inject new forces into the court, and also for the harmony of the relationship between the monarch and his subjects. Therefore, this spring examination is different from the usual 3-year imperial examination system. The autumn examination that has been missed can only be cancelled, so the poor children who need to travel thousands of miles to Beijing to take the examination are not included. Originally, the palace examination was scheduled for April after the spring examination, but now it is mid-March, and the preliminary examination can only be scheduled before April. After the preliminary examination, the examiners still have to mark the papers, so the palace examination in April is definitely too late. Rong Yu set the time for the palace examination on the 6th day of May. Although the process is simple, the difficulty of the spring examination is not low, and Prime Minister Lu is aware that the regent has a cold and strict temperament and will not tolerate any fraud or cheating, so the selection of examiners is arranged with great caution. After the regent's order was issued, Prime Minister Lu and several cabinet ministers have been discussing the matter for the past 2 days. Prime Minister Xie was in charge of military affairs, and the spring examination was not within his jurisdiction. Besides, Xiejin was also going to participate, so he had to avoid suspicion. After consultation with Prime Minister Lu and other cabinet ministers, a list was drawn up on March 16 and submitted to the imperial study, and Xian Yuanhua was asked to present it to the regent for review. Wrong. You had no objection after reading it, and the matter was settled. For the children of the rich and powerful, this was a very rare opportunity that no one wanted to miss. But for Xiejin, it was just a process that he didn't care much about but had to go through. Spring examination. Xian Yuanyao sat by the window on the second floor of Yule restaurant, his eyebrows raised high. You are the legitimate son of the Xie family, Master Xieju, known as the #1 son of Dongling, and even the king of hell has to give you some face. You actually have to take the exam with those children from aristocratic families. Why? Xiejin took a sip of wine slowly with a wine cup in hand, and said in a light voice, you think it's incredible. Xian Yuanyao frowned. It's not that I think it's incredible, but I can't imagine that scene. After all, Master Xie's behavior doesn't look like a scholar who takes the imperial examination. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 475. Can't imagine? Xiejin raised his eyes slightly and glanced at him lightly. Do you think I am arrogant enough to ignore the rules? Isn't it? Xian Yuanyao looked at him. To be honest, I couldn't help but wonder at the beginning, how could you be willing to obey the Lord? If the Lord hadn't taken you in, I don't think you could even be the emperor. They won't take it seriously. When Xiejin heard this, his charming red phoenix eyes couldn't help but tilt up slightly. The one who knows me is Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao felt a chill. He originally wanted him to be more serious, but he couldn't help but give up when he thought that this man had never been a gentleman. But right now he is more concerned about another issue. What do you think of what Prince Zanruo of Yu Kingdom said before? I don't think much of it, Xiejin said in a calm tone, obviously not taking it seriously. There's nothing wrong with being alone. I don't insist on having a family full of descendants. Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly. Do you believe what he said? I don't believe what he said, but I believe that I am indeed that destiny. Xiejin smiled casually. I was killed by an expert when I was a child, and the comments were consistent with what Zanruo said, but at that time my father didn't believe it or not, beat him out. Xian Yuanyao frowned. Then what should you do? What should I do? Xiejin raised his eyebrows and looked at him. If you have no heirs, you will have no heirs. What else can you do? Xian Yuanyao looked at him silently, feeling that he was really different from a normal person. I can be open-minded, Xiejin said calmly. For people like me, it may not be a blessing to have many descendants. Xian Yuanyao frowned. Why do you say that? You wonder why a person like me is willing to obey the Lord. In fact, sometimes even I find it incredible. Xiejin leaned on his chair and turned to look out the window. My father has an unruly temper, and I also have the same temper. The Xie family has such a tradition. If I really have a son in the future, there is a high probability that he will still have this temperament. Xian Yuanyao said, isn't such a bad temper. What do you think? Xiejin turned to look at him. If you were a king, could you endure your ministers being so rebellious? But I see that you are very respectful to the Lord. Xian Yuanyao's expression was subtle. If you dare to be unruly in front of the Lord, I will break your legs. Xiejin was silent after hearing this and looked at him silently for a moment. Yao Yao is so cute when he talks. Xian Yuanyao frowned and glared at him. Didn't you just say that if the Lord hadn't taken in this evildoer like me, I might not even pay attention to the emperor? Xiejin smiled lightly. Although it is an exaggeration, it does make some sense. Like me with such a temper, if the current Holy Lord is a mediocre person, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to get me to obey him. Although Xian Yuanyao is a military commander, he is usually straight-minded and not very good at detours, unlike Xiejin, who has a delicate heart and a sweet heart. However, he is not so stupid that he cannot understand the words. Besides, Xiejin's words were straightforward enough. So he understood why Xiejin said that having descendants may not necessarily be a blessing. The king is wise and strong, so he can naturally tolerate and even appreciate his capable and tempered ministers. Because he has the ability to control and control, he is not afraid of his ministers doing anything outrageous, and because his mind is broad enough, as long as he is talented, capable, and loyal, then the king nature can be tolerant. But this situation does not apply to all kings. It can even be said that since ancient times, there have been few kings as strong as his family master who can subdue people like Sejin. Most emperors are already praised by others as long as they are good at the emperor's mind and know how to balance the power of the ministers of the family. It relies more on nepotism in the harem to balance interests, so that the major families have to surrender, because the interests are tied to the king. This is also one of the benefits of the emperor's 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. There are actually very few people who can truly put aside interests and make powerful ministers willing to loyal to them. Not to mention people like Sejin, why not Xian Yuanyao? The more proud a man is, the more willing he is to obey the drive of the true king, rather than grovel to a simple relationship between king and minister. Therefore, it is well known to everyone in the imperial capital that Sieju is willing to obey the regent. He is obeying his own heart and not because of the inferiority of the monarch and his ministers. But such a relationship is rare. No one can guarantee that the next king will still be as powerful and admirable as Rong Yu. Similarly, no one can guarantee that the next generation of Xia family men will be willing to loyally submit to the new emperor. The most important thing is that with Siejin's current position in front of the regent, it is not a problem to aspire to the position of the most powerful minister in the future. The Xia family, one of the 4 prominent families, can reach an unprecedented peak during the reign of the empress. However, what goes up must come down. Whether it is the king's intolerance or his minister's disrespect, it means great risks for a prosperous family, but such risks are often ignored. Interest can blind people's eyes. Since ancient times, how many people have ignored risks in pursuit of ultimate power and interests, and how many aristocratic families that have been favored for centuries have collapsed in an instant. When a family becomes extremely powerful, it is a threat to the imperial power. The emperor obviously couldn't tolerate it. Xian Yuanyao understood the implication of Siejin's words, and also understood that Siejin's pride did not allow him to be timid because of such risk scruples. He wanted to be wanton and indulgent, even if he was loyal to the Ming dynasty, he had to be vigorous. Therefore, having no heirs means that he can do what he wants unscrupulously, at least when Rong Yu and Nan 11 are in power, they can tolerate all his arbitrary actions. Xian Yuanyao thought deeply for a long time before saying calmly, "The master is different from the previous kings. He and the queen are in love, so they should not have too many children. The successor to the throne is more about quality than quantity." Moreover, the little prince was appointed as the crown prince at birth, and he will be trained as an emperor in the future. The next generation of emperors taught by the master should not be much worse than the master. Siejin took a sip of wine and said in a faint voice, "The master can manage this generation, but not the generations to come." Xian Yuanyao was speechless for a moment. That's true. The situation is quite special for the empress in this generation. With the regent's feelings for the empress, it is impossible for Nan 11 to have too many children, so he can teach his son personally, but the next generation of emperors will resume the male emperor's rule, and by then there will be many children in the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. No emperor can guarantee that his descendants will be wise rulers. With the current prominence of the Xia family, if they encounter an emperor who is not so wise, the outcome is actually predictable, unless they can retreat bravely and protect themselves. Did my words scare you? Siejin put down the wine cup, held up his chin and looked at him with a playful look in his eyes. It's not that serious, it's just because this is my fate, so I'm just making fun of myself. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 476. After all, Xiejin was never a person who would be dazzled by interests. Therefore, even if the Xie family is really passed down from generation to generation and becomes extremely prosperous, he will withdraw in time to control the risks. However, regarding the matter of heir inheritance, he is actually more open-minded than most people. He lets nature take its course and does not force it. There is nothing to take to heart. Xian Yuanyao thought about it and felt that he was not the god of salvation. He could not give Xiejin any real help, and verbal comfort would not have much effect, so it was better not to say anything. Besides, a peerless evildoer like Xiejin probably doesn't appreciate meaningless comfort. So he quickly changed the subject. Chunwei, are you ready? There is nothing to prepare, Xiejin said in a casual tone. I don't plan to take the top prize. Xian Yuanyao frowned. Isn't it good to be the number one scholar? He's so majestic, and he can even ride a horse through the streets. Xiejin looked at him thoughtfully, with a hint of teasing in his eyes. If Yao Yao agrees to give me his life, I can try to get the number one scholar back, and Quan will fight for Yao Yao's face. You're talking nonsense again. Xian Yuanyao looked around. Fortunately, there is no one in the lobby on the second floor. Otherwise, if his reputation is ruined, how will he see anyone in the future? He looked at Xiejin angrily. Being the number one scholar is just to gain face for the Xie family. What does it have to do with this prince? You pledged yourself to me, doesn't it matter? Even if you are really destined to be alone in this life, don't hold me back. Xian Yuanyao said, I want to marry a wife and have children. Not only do I want to marry a wife, I also want to have beautiful wives and concubines to hug me from left to right. Years later, my children and grandchildren will be hungry for you. Accustomed to Xiejin's frequent jokes, Xian Yuanyao has developed an invulnerable face and does not take his words seriously at all. However, for some unknown reason, even though he didn't care, he could no longer laugh and laugh calmly with Xiejin as before. After all, he was not as open-minded as Xiejin, nor was he as unscrupulous. Of course, I also have some vague scruples in my heart, worried that if the fake thing turns out to be real, it will end badly. Xiejin raised his eyebrows lightly and clicked his tongue. I praised you for being cute just now. Why are you choking now? Are you stabbing me in the heart on purpose? You asked for it. Xian Yuanyao stood up. I want to go to the palace, will you go? What are you doing in the palace? Let's go see the little prince, Xian Yuanyao said, turning around and walking towards the stairs. You, a famous person in front of the imperial family, often enter the palace, so of course you don't think it's strange. I haven't seen what the little prince looks like yet. I have a lot of free time today, so I have to go and see who the little prince looks like. Xiejin stood up and followed him. Whose son will certainly look like him? The child is not born to anyone. Xian Yuanyao glanced at him. By the way, have you told your father about your matter? What's up? What Prince Zanruo said? Why does Yao Yao care about me so much? Xiejin raised his eyebrows. You don't have any ulterior motives, do you? Xian Yuanyao found that this person really deserved a beating. You really need strong concentration to talk to him, otherwise you will be so angry that you want to hit someone at any time. Going down the stairs, there were a few people eating in the lobby. Xian Yuanyao didn't want to talk to Xiejin in public, so he strode out of the restaurant. Many people in the imperial capital knew the ninth master of the Xie family. Several people eating in the lobby on the first floor looked up and saw Xiejin coming down from upstairs. They were about to say hello out of courtesy, but saw that Xiejin had already walked out without looking back. So a few people gave up and watched Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin get on their horses one after another, and quickly rode away. Xian Yuanyao's horse speed is not very fast. There are many people on the busy street. Riding the horse at a gallop will not be good and will scare the elderly and children. Besides, he is not in a hurry, so he only holds the reins and walks slowly. He and Xiejin were both good-looking and distinguished noblemen. They were riding horses on the street, which naturally attracted a lot of attention. However, Xian Yuanyao was obviously used to it and said calmly, "After the spring festival, the Lord will order to hold a martial arts test." Xiejin heard what he said and knew what it meant, and said leisurely, "Yao Yao means, I will be the top scholar in essays, but you will be the top scholar in martial arts." Xian Yuanyao's face turned green. This person is really hopeless. He took a deep breath, not wanting to speak anymore, and rode forward in silence. After passing a crowded place, he flicked the reins and sped up towards the palace gate of the inner city. Xiejin fell behind him, still strolling slowly and leisurely. Looking at the figure of the young man running away, he sighed softly, feeling a vague sense of sadness in his heart. He really doesn't care about the inheritance of his descendants. He can even be unafraid of worldly opinions and rumors, but... Xiejin sighed. He walked slowly. When he arrived at the Dajhan Palace, Xian Yuanyao, who was one step ahead, had already had a quarrel with Prince Zanruo of the Yu Kingdom. From a distance, Xiejin heard Zanruo's explosive voice, "Are you blind? This child, you obviously look like your majesty, but how dare you say you look like the regent?" Xian Yuanyao sneered, "I don't know who the blind person is. If you don't believe me, ask other people. When I say like his majesty, I mean like his majesty. If you have eye problems, go get them treated. Don't talk nonsense here." Xian Yuanyao sneered, "Aside from being good at talking nonsense, you are only good at deceiving yourself and others. Xian Yuanyao, don't think that you are the regent's confidant. This prince can't do anything to you." Zhanruo said coldly, "Believe it or not, I asked His Majesty to send you to the border, and the regent didn't dare to say anything." "Ha! You really scared me to death." Xian Yuanyao laughed, "What do you really think you are? Are you showing off your power as the prince of Yu Kingdom in my Dongling territory? Do you believe that if I raise my hand, 10,000 cavalrymen under my command can make your Yu Kingdom disappear into ashes? You dream faster." Xiejin paused, asked someone to inform, and after getting permission, he stepped into the main hall. Nan 11 was resting at this moment, and Rong Yu was sitting at the table reviewing memorials. Xiejin greeted and asked, "Does the Prince of Yu Kingdom plan to stay in Dongling for retirement?" In the past few days, Zhanruo seemed to completely treat the Dongling Palace as his own home. He ran to the Dajhan Palace every day and protected the little prince tightly, like his own son. If he said that he loved the little prince, that's why he loved him so much, but Zhanruo was so hostile to the regent, mocking and ridiculing him everywhere, and wished to clear the relationship between the little prince and Rong Yu. "I really don't know what medicine this prince took wrong. Don't bother with him." Rong Yu pushed the memorial to Xiejin, "Since you're here, move these to the imperial study and let Xian Yuanhua and Xian Yuanchen help you deal with it." Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 477. Xiejin's expression paused, and his eyes fell on the piles of memorials. "Has the Lord forgotten that I have to prepare homework recently in preparation for the spring trial?" Rong Yu raised his eyes slightly and said calmly, "So." Xiejin couldn't help but want to sigh again. There are too many unfair things in the world, and what's even more unfair is that when encountering unfair things, you don't dare to argue for yourself, and you can only silently swallow the unfairness. "I would like to thank you, Your Majesty, for your recognition of your important role," Xiejin said resignedly. "I will definitely work harder for those who are capable. I will share my worries and solve my problems for you, so that Your Majesty can spend more time with Her Majesty the Queen." Rong Yu hummed and didn't feel there was anything wrong in pushing matters that should have belonged to the regent to Xiejin. His tone was so calm that no emotion could be heard. It's just spring, it shouldn't take up much of your time and energy. Xiejin was silent. Should he thank the Lord for thinking highly of him? However, it is an honor to be respected by the Lord, and you should accept this trust obediently. After all, although this sentence does not sound profound, if you dare to refute it, try it. Although it is harder for the capable person to work harder, it is still 100 times better than the incompetent abandonment. Xiejin left with a bunch of memorials in his arms. He couldn't help but wonder that he was already taking care of the king's worries before he even held an official position. When he officially entered the court, would he have to be a horse and a horse to share the government affairs for the king? After all, his master has to spend time with Her Majesty the Queen and teach the young prince. The time spent on handling government affairs will probably be reduced a lot. Will all government affairs be delegated to him then? When he thought of his miserable life in the future, Xiejin suddenly had the idea of retreating to the mountains and forests. Rong Yu had no time to pay attention to his slander at this moment, so he stood up and entered the inner hall. In his opinion, there is no need to take this matter to heart at all. If he can't even take care of his studies and government affairs well, he is too incompetent. He can be sent to the border to build the city, so why should he be a favorite of the imperial court? The regent believed that a favorite must be able to climb mountains of swords and descend into seas of fire, investigate cases and kill people. They must also be loyal and perform their duties without complaining, and they must be willing to do whatever it takes. He can be indulged in any indulgence as high as the sky and the sea is, but he must also be knowledgeable in both civil and military affairs and be on call at all times. Xiejin happens to be the most suitable candidate. Nan 11 actually didn't sleep much. Although the mother needs more rest, the baby is taken care of by the wet nurse and the eldest princess, so she does not need to do it herself, so she gets enough sleep at night, and Rong Yu takes care of her closely during the day. There really is nothing for her to worry about, and she can sleep whenever she wants during the day. If you don't want to sleep, just lie down quietly. In short, she just needs to take good care of herself in peace and contentment. Rong Yu was also afraid that she would be bored by being alone, so he stayed with her and chatted with her from time to pass the boring time. Seeing Rong Yu come in, she stood up and sat on the bedside. Seeing this, Rong Yu quickly took a pillow and put it behind her to make her lean more comfortably. Rong Yu, is it really okay for you to squeeze Xiejin like this? Nan 11 said in a helpless tone. You can't use everything to its best advantage. Rong Yu poured a glass of warm water for her and said calmly, a wise master is one who knows people well and assigns them well. Xiejin must be scolding you in his heart. He doesn't dare. Rong Yu dragged a stool over and sat down. It is his duty to share His Majesty's worries. Nan 11 laughed. You, the regent, blatantly use your power to oppress others, and you don't allow them to resist. Rong Yu didn't refute and fed her some water. Are you hungry? Nan 11 said, didn't you just eat half an hour ago? Rong Yu turned to look at the sky outside the window. In a few days, we can go out for a walk. The weather is just right now, the spring is warm and the flowers are blooming, so we don't have to worry about catching a cold. Rong Yu. Nan 11 said, when do you plan to return to Dazhu? Rong Yu's expression paused. The matter in Dazhu must be resolved as soon as possible. Nan 11 said, King Yun's supervision of the country and governing the country is not a long-term solution. If he does not ascend the throne, those princes will not give up. Such delay is not good for the country. Rong Yu was silent for a moment. March and April are busy with government affairs, and May, June and July are hot and not suitable for traveling. How about we go back in September? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. You can go back alone. I don't have to go. Rong Yu pursed her lips and stopped talking for a moment. What? Nan 11 laughed. You, the wise and powerful regent of the Zhou dynasty, shouldn't you go back and take care of the mess you left behind? Wrong, you thought for a while. I'll send a direct message to him. Wrong, you. Nan 11 interrupted him. I ascended the throne in Dongling, and you, the regent of the great Zhou dynasty, became the concubine of the queen. The whole world already knows this, and the princes of the great Zhou dynasty are no exception. If you don't even go back to support King Yun as emperor, the princes of the Zhou dynasty and the courtiers will think that you will never return to the great Zhou dynasty in the future, and their fear of you will be greatly weakened. Although the handwriting can allow King Yun to ascend the throne, it cannot. It is shocking that if the princes are not convinced, they can come up with more than one reason to prevent King Yun from ascending the throne. Wrong, you said nothing. Even if King Yun successfully ascends the throne and becomes the emperor, without your deterrence, it will be difficult for King Yun to grasp real power in a short time. Nan 11 said, his foundation is weak. In the past few months, he has been able to supervise the country and govern the country. The minister's obedience depends on your prestige. If he loses this prestige, his future as an emperor will be very difficult. Wrong, you knew that what she said was true. King Qi and others had competed for the throne with Rong Chuiyun back then, and each had their own supportive courtiers and factions. Only King Yun had always stayed out of the matter, alone and without the support of his confidants. Although Ling Fan and Qi Lin are here, the pure force cannot make it easy for King Yun to take the throne. The power in the court is intertwined. If someone really wants to trip him up, they can do it by just making some moves. But Rong Yu still doesn't want to go back alone. Even if he travels day and night, it will take at least a month to go from Dongling to Dazhu and back. He is worried about staying in Dazhu for a few more days. We'll discuss this later, he said. Maybe we can think of other solutions. What will we discuss later? Xianyuan 11 came over with the child in her arms, her tone leisurely. You two parents don't care about your sons at all. Do you want to pass the throne to Hao now, and you two can retire to the mountains and forests together? Rong Yu stood up and took her son from her hands, saying calmly, if my mother-in-law can be the regent princess, I don't miss the power of the regent. Xianyuan 11's mouth twitched, and she looked at him expressionlessly. I can make the decision now. Select a few more outstanding young men from aristocratic families to enter the palace, and act as regents as the emperor's husband. I agree. Jean Ruo came over from the side hall. Your Highness, put me in the harem. With me here, your Majesty can sleep peacefully and enjoy leisure. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 478. As soon as he finished speaking, a hand hooked his neck and forcibly dragged him out of the side hall. What? Zanruo struggled and subconsciously punched the man behind him in the face. Let me go. Do you want to die? Xianyuan Yao frowned. Being so arrogant in front of the regent, do you think your life is too long? This prince of the Yu kingdom is really a man who likes to seek death. If he doesn't drag this man out, he is afraid that his master will drag him out and kill him later. How dare you dare to propose to be the queen's husband in front of the regent? Zanruo broke free from his grasp and said coldly, get away. Xianyuan Yao's expression was not very good. Are you deliberately seeking death? Who is looking for death? Zanruo sneered coldly. Do you think this prince is a coward like you? Xianyuan Yao felt that his mind was not normal. What does this have to do with being a coward? Is it possible that if you are not a coward, you have to take the initiative to die? You must be sick. Xianyuan Yao looked at him emotionlessly and said calmly, this general wants to leave the palace, you can do it yourself. With that said, he really walked away. Anyway, he just came to see the little prince today, and he should leave after watching, so as not to upset his family master by staying here. Her Majesty the Queen is still recuperating her health. Who would take the initiative to disturb her if she becomes impatient? As for the Prince of Yu, who is not very smart and has a sharp tongue, he can do whatever he likes. What does his life and death have to do with him? Jean Rouault didn't know what he thought of, and looked at his back thoughtfully. Xian Yuan Yao. Xian Yuan Yao stopped and turned to look at him. What are you doing? Do you like men? Xian Yuan Yao was stunned. What did you say? This prince asks you, do you like men? Xian Yuan Yao frowned. You must be sick. It seems that I won't like it anymore. Zhan Rouault smiled lightly. I hope you can maintain such a firm idea in the future. Xian Yuan Yao looked at him like an idiot for a while, then turned and left. Zhan Rouault stared at his back for a moment, then clicked his tongue and raised his lips meaningfully. It seems that someone really has to live alone. Prince Zhan Rouault, a young man behind him, said politely, Thank you, master, for asking Prince Zhan Rouault to come over. Zhan Rouault turned his head and looked at a young man of similar age standing in front of him, raising his eyebrows mockingly. Who is he? Why should he let me go over and I have to go over obediently? Xian Yuan Hua said in a humble tone, Master Xie said that he has something to ask for advice. Consult. Jean Rouault could probably guess what he wanted to ask for, so he said casually, Where is he? Xian Yuan Hua said, The Imperial Study Room. The Imperial Study is not a place where this prince should go, Jean Rouault said calmly, turning to look at the sky. I can deign to go to his Xie family for a visit. You go and tell Xie Jin that tonight prepare a sumptuous dinner to entertain this prince. Xian Yuan Hua was silent for a moment. I will convey it to Mr. Xie. The inner hall was quiet for a moment. Xian Yuan 11 had a strange expression. His eyes fell in the direction where Zhan Rouault was being dragged away, and he said thoughtfully, 11 what does this Prince Zhan Rouault think of you? He doesn't really want to be your royal husband, does he? She has been secretly guessing Jean Rouault's purpose for the past 2 days. The Prince of the Yu Kingdom seems to have no ulterior motives and is not hostile to Dongling. And with the mere strength of the Yu Kingdom, it is obviously unlikely that he will fight with Nanyu and Nanyu. The envoys from northern Xinjiang also came with some ambition. But he was full of strong hostility towards the regent and didn't bother to hide it. Anyone with eyes could see it. Obviously Zhan Rouault was not afraid of Rong Yu, but he was completely protective of Nan 11. One can't help but wonder if he likes Nan 11. Mom, you are worrying too much. Jean Rouault is just a child, and he is talking nonsense on purpose. Nan 11 spoke subconsciously, and her expression became strange after saying this. He doesn't want to be my royal husband, the purpose is to make Rong Yu is jealous. Xian Yuan 11 was surprised. Did she deliberately make Rong Yu jealous? What kind of psychology is this? Are you full? Her eyes fell on Rong Yu's face, and she saw that his expression was calm, and he didn't seem to be angry. Of course, he couldn't be said to be happy. But such a reaction is abnormal enough. She sees how possessive Rong Yu is, and how can she tolerate Jean Rouault talking nonsense in front of 11 She didn't know what secrets the couple had with Jean Rouault, and didn't want to ask too much about it. She said calmly, I'll go back to the princess's house first. However, you guys can coax him for a while and communicate with him about the relationship between mother and son. Wait until he's hungry, then let the wet nurse take her to breastfeed. Nan 11 nodded. You have worked hard these past 2 days, mother. Go back and have a good rest. Xian Yuan 11 nodded, thought for a while, and then said one more thing. 11 has been recuperating for half a month. Rong Yu, is it time for you to go to court to discuss politics? 11 has Yunyu and Nanny waiting on her, so there should be nothing wrong with her. Don't worry. Rong Yu said, when 11 is out of confinement, I will go to court with her. Xian Yuan 11 frowned. Don't worry, Mother. Nan 11 considerately helped her husband out of the siege. Rong Yu knows how to make good use of people, and the important affairs of the government will be handled properly. Xian Yuan 11 glanced at the couple and said, Okay, just know it yourself. After saying that, he quickly left the Dajhan palace. Silver Moon sends her out. Jean-Ruo has been a little too presumptuous these past 2 days. Nan 11 frowned slightly. If he continues to make trouble unreasonably, let him go back to your country as soon as possible. Rong Yu was silent for a moment and asked him in a low voice, "Are you willing?" "Why are you so reluctant?" Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. "Is it possible that after reincarnation, in addition to getting married to you, I also have to recognize all the people I knew before? Do you want to make a list for me?" When Rong Yu heard this, his voice was a little soft. "If you had said this earlier, I would have helped him throw him back to your country half a month ago." "Did you say that earlier?" It was only half a month ago that she fully recovered her memory. How could she have told her so early? Nan 11 sighed, "But you can't blame him entirely for some things. From his point of view, what you did in the past is really unforgivable." Rong Yu was silent for a moment and hummed softly, "I know. If it was wrong Huijin in the past, he naturally didn't care whether Zanruo could understand him or not, and it didn't matter if he was hostile. However, Rong Yu, who had been reborn, was always reflecting on what he had done in his previous life, so he could tolerate Zanruo again and again in this life. But these are the relationship between the two of us. Whether we can forgive or not does not become a reason for his arrogance." Nan 11 reached out to take her son and said in a calm tone, "I will talk to him in a few days and let everything go. There is no need to always live in the memory of his past. You, like him, should break free early." Rong Yu looked at her silently. 11 You haven't been very gentle to me in the past 2 days," he whispered, his voice soft, as if he was a little aggrieved. "I feel like I have fallen out of favor." Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 479. Nan 11 was silent. "Aren't you gentle enough?" Rong Yu nodded. "I'm not out of confinement yet, so I can only lie in bed and rest every day." Nan 11 pondered, "Even if you want to sleep with me, I'm afraid my body won't allow it for the time being." "Go to bed?" Rong Yu's expression was subtle. "That's not what I meant." "Where did 11 think? Is he such a beast?" "Then what do you mean?" Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. "Originally, according to the rules, we couldn't live together even as husband and wife, but now we live together. It's not enough for you to occupy the 3 palaces and 6th courtyard by yourself. Do you love me? The queen is in confinement. Logically, she should be taken care of by the palace staff. You, the regent, can handle the affairs of the court. But the fact is that you stay in the palace every day to chat with me and personally take care of me, a weak queen. No, is this called falling out of favor by pretending to be someone else's?" Rong Yu was speechless. "Also," Nan 11 said casually, "from Dazhu to Dongling, did I obey your words? Did I protect you in front of all the civil and military officials? The ministers asked me to choose the emperor's husband, which I completely refused. Take it and leave it all to you. I remember all the things you lied to me about before. I just don't care about you. How dare you accuse me of not being gentle enough to you? Rong Yu. Come on, tell me, how much more gentleness do you need?" Nan 11 said in a calm tone. "It hurts to hold you in my arms like how." Rong Yu's expression became a little stagnant. His eyes fell on the face of the sleeping little guy, and he was speechless for a long time. "I want to hug him, but can I hug him?" Nan 11 glanced at him sideways. "You're so good at what you get, but you still dare to look aggrieved? You're so embarrassed." Rongyu was silent for a moment and curled his lips slightly. What are you embarrassed about? Is it possible that you want to compete with Hauer for favor? Nan 11 said, lowering her head and kissing her son's pink and white face. The dignified and solemn regent is not afraid of making people laugh. Hauer, you say yes. Rongyu thought about it carefully. It seemed that 11er was right. Apart from not being able to hold him in her arms and pet him, she had done everything she could. He had plotted against her in both past and present lives, and she tolerated his plots generously. Going to Dongling to become the queen, whether she wanted to or not, was fulfilling his wish. She fulfilled his obsession, resolved his problems, and soothed his uneasiness. Even in Jeanruo's case, she actually protected him more and did not spoil Jeanruo. In addition to being more gentle and loving to his son, it seems that there is no one he treats better than him. Rongyu thought for a while and suddenly felt a little ashamed. Actually, I don't think it's appropriate for us to stay together day and night. Nan 11 pondered for a moment. It would be better if we were separated. They say a break is better than a wedding. If you have your own separate bedroom, I, the queen, will be the regent every night. The king's palace, then the palace people will definitely feel that the regent is particularly favored and has unparalleled honor and favor, and no one can replace him. In this way, 11er Rongyu was dissatisfied. This idea is not a good idea at all. Nan 11 looked at him. Why is it bad? Rongyu pursed her lips slightly, took her hand and kissed it. I know I was wrong, 11er, please calm down. Nan 11 hummed indifferently. What's wrong? The mistake is that I shouldn't be petty and think wildly. Rongyu's tone was particularly sincere. You shouldn't be jealous. What else? Besides. Rongyu was silent for a moment. It should be gone. Think about it. Rongyu frowned, looked at her without saying a word, and said firmly, no more. He resolutely refused to admit that he had neglected his duties and was lazy in politics for the sake of his children. Nan 11 said in a calm tone, since I can't think of anything, just sleep on the couch in the outer hall tonight. I'll come in when I think about it. Rongyu looked at her silently. It's useless to look at me. Nan 11's gaze fell on her son's face. I will sleep with my son tonight and let the wet nurse have a good night's rest. Rongyu finally discovered that Nan 11, who had recovered her memory, had also regained the majesty of the Empress in her bones. Although her words were extremely light, he could not refute them easily. Then he realized that he had shot himself in the foot. However, Rongyu would obey on other matters, except that it was impossible to sleep on the same bed as Nan 11. In the evening, when Yunyu and others came in to help Nan 11 wash and dry herself, Rongyu went to take a bath and cleanse himself, and when he came back, he went to bed consciously. Stretched out his long arms and pulled Nan 11 into his arms. Even if Nan 11 said lightly, are you going to resist the decree? Rongyu just smiled and said softly, Your Majesty, just watch and deal with it. My husband will never resist. Nan 11's mouth twitched and she couldn't help but hum. The majesty that had been suppressed for half a day was finally broken. The regent was deeply in love with his empress in the Dajhan palace. After Xiejin handled the memorial in the imperial study for him, he returned to the palace and ordered a sumptuous dinner to be prepared in Jinyuan. Jeanruo arrived as promised and feasted without any ceremony. Although the way he eats has the elegance and nobility that belongs to the royal family, the speed is not like the calculation of immortality, but more like a starving ghost who was reborn in the wrong child. However, Xiejin has already seen his temper, and this person has nothing to do with the immortal spirit. I know what you want to talk to me about. Jeanruo ate and drank enough, and asked Xiejin to pour him a cup of tea, and then finally said graciously, Your destiny has been decided. If you force it to change, you can't change it. There will inevitably be a huge price to pay, and it is obviously impossible for me to do such a thankless thing for you. Xiejin raised the corners of his lips slightly. I don't intend to ask you to do anything. Then let me speak frankly, Jean Rouault couldn't eat someone else's sumptuous dinner in vain. You have two choices. First, be alone and carefree, with no successors, and die alone. Second, if you can force it, the person in your heart can have someone as a companion. Xiejin smiled lightly. So, this is a matter of choice. Of course, Zanruo took a sip of tea. Some people's lives can be changed, and some people's lives cannot be changed. It depends on how you choose. Xiejin narrowed his eyes and said nothing. If you want him to have no successor like you can actually do it. After all, nothing is difficult in the world, as long as there are people who are willing. Zanruo's tone was joking, with a bit of bad meaning. It depends on manpower. Xiejin thought about the meaning of his words casually, and said calmly, for a moment, what if I don't force it? It's better not to force yourself. Jean Rouault put down the teacup, stood up, patted his sleeves and turned to leave. It will help the children and grandchildren of others. Xiejin understood. In fact, it is not that he has two choices, but that person can have two fates. It's just that this fate is indirectly in Xiejin's hands. This conclusion amused him. Xiejin smiled deeply and shook his head slowly. Tisk. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 480. The government affairs of the court are running as usual. The 9-day spring festival began at the end of March. Candidates were not allowed to have contact with the outside world during the examination, so Xiejin was unable to enter the palace to serve on errands during these 9 days. Fortunately, Nan 11 was almost full moon at the end of March, and his body had already recovered as usual. You can move around the bedroom as usual. Occasionally, I would go out for a walk, admire flowers in the palace garden, and drink tea. Wrong, you worked more hard on government affairs. The full moon child's features look more delicate and noble, and his little face seems to have been carefully carved by God. It looks beautiful no matter how you look at it. How's little face looks more and more like Rong Yu as he grows longer. Nan 11 sat on the brocade couch by the window, with the little one who had just turned 1 month lying in her arms. The temperament is also similar, quiet, and not prone to crying. It's obvious at first glance the calm style of a king. Except for crying like an ordinary baby on the day he was born, the little guy rarely cries until now. When he is hungry, he will pucker his mouth. The wet nurse has experience in taking care of children. She will hurry up when she knows that your highness is hungry. Pick him up and feed him. A 1-month-old child is actually very easy to take care of if he or she is not feeling unwell, especially a child like Hauer who is quiet and doesn't cry. He will go to bed after eating, or just stay quietly by himself with his eyes as big as black grapes. Hardly any fuss. If the prince hears this, he will definitely be very happy. Yunyu said with a smile. Master always praises the prince a lot. The calm style of a king. Although this sentence is perfect for Rong Yu, the same words spoken to Nan 11 from others will definitely have a different effect, especially her prince's temperament seems to have been tempered during this period, which has made him less confident. Nan 11 smiled and wanted to say that Rong Yu always liked to pretend to be pitiful. With his strong skills and invincible temperament, who else in the world could be more capable of saying the style of a king than him? However, deep down, Rong Yu does not have a sense of security. This lack of confidence does not come from doubts about his own abilities, but from emotional worries about gains and losses. Nan 11's eyes narrowed slightly, and she lowered her eyes to look at her son who was lying in her arms and seemed a little sleepy. She murmured to herself, your father's worry about gains and losses cannot be tolerated. He needs to be cured. To put it bluntly, it actually needs to be sorted out. Your Majesty. Yin Chuang walked in from outside the palace door and lowered her head to report, MRS Zipping Ho wants to see you. MRS Zipping How? Nan 11 was slightly surprised. After thinking for a moment, she didn't remember who this person was, so she asked, who is MRS Zipping How? The Duke of Zhenguo was demoted and is now the Marquis of Zipping. Nan 11 hummed in understanding, just herself. Yes. Nan 11 thought about the purpose of this lady's meeting with her, and said lightly, let her come in. Yes. Yin's Huang turned around and walked out. Not long after, a lady in a lake blue dress walked in with her eyebrows lowered under the guidance of the palace servants. She knelt down in the outer hall and said, my wife, I see your majesty the queen. Long live your majesty. Long live your majesty. Long live your majesty. Ping Shen Nan 11 said, stood up and put Hauer on the bed to sleep. Mrs. Fang suddenly asked to see me, why? Mrs. Fang thanked her, but she knelt and did not move. There was a hint of pleading in her voice. My wife came to the palace today to ask for His Majesty's grace. Grace. Nan 11 returned to the brocade couch and sat down, taking a sip of the tea presented by Yunyu. Let's talk about it. Regardless of whether she was the former madam of the Duke of Zhenguo or the current madam of the Marquis of Zipping, this was Fang's first serious face-to-face with the Holy Spirit alone. She had heard her daughter Lan Yi describe the queen before, and she had a general impression that Nan 11 was a boudoir girl who was ignorant of the world. After all, she was still young and grew up in a family of officials in the Zhou dynasty, so she should be of the same age as ordinary people. Girls are generally the same. Even if you ascend to the supreme position, relying on the protection of a regent next to you, you should be easy to fool. However, after just 2 sentences at this moment, she felt an invisible pressure coming down on her so tightly that she couldn't help but feel frightened, even more frightened than before when she met the queen. Mrs. Fang probably didn't come here to be in a daze, right? Nan 11 glanced at her casually. If you have something to say, just say it without any scruples. Even if what you ask for is wrong, I will not punish you for it. Fang was startled and quickly suppressed the fear in her heart. She lowered her head and said, my daughter, Lan Yi, has not been doing well in Prince Wei's mansion recently. My wife, I want to know if I can. Is there anything you can do? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows and said in a low voice, do you want me to take back my life and cancel the marriage between Fang Lanyi and Xianyuan Yan? No, it's not. Fang's face changed slightly, and she shook her head slowly, with a look of sorrow on her face. Lanyi is a child who has suffered a lot, and I feel sorry for her plight, but her innocence is no longer there, even though I feel bad, but I can only marry her to Mr. Yan, otherwise, what will I do in this life? I just want to. Fang's voice became lower and lower, like a whisper, I just want to ask for grace for Lan Yi, so that she can have an easier time in Prince Wei's mansion. What grace do you ask for? Mrs. Fang's eyes were red and she said sadly, Your Majesty has the final say. As long as she can no longer be abused by Mr. Yan, I would like to express my gratitude to Your Majesty for your kindness. As he said that, he kowtowed deeply. Nan 11 said nothing. Years ago, Xuanyuanyan was imprisoned in Tianlao for insulting Fang Lanyi. Rong Yu ordered the Minister of Punishment to investigate, and Xiejin assisted, but actually tampered with it, so no flowers were found in the end. Xuanyuanyan was imprisoned in the prison until the 6th day of the Lunar New Year. On the day of the resumption of the imperial court, Rong Yu issued an order to release him. Of course, the Minister of Justice who failed to investigate the case was also demoted. Counting it down, it has been almost 3 months since Xianyuanyan returned to the Prince of Wei's mansion. Have they had their wedding? Nan 11 asked. Even if you don't want a grand ceremony, the formality of the marriage should still be carried out. Your Majesty, the wedding has been quietly held in the Prince of Wei's mansion, Fang said in a low voice, but there was no big banquet. The Prince of Wei said he couldn't afford to lose face. Can't afford to lose face? Nan 11 sneered. His son was capable of such a beastly thing, but now he felt ashamed. If the matter hadn't been too big, with Xianyuanyan's brutal past record, not only would those girls who were abused by him have died in vain, but who knows how many women would be ruined by him in the future. As for Fang Lanyi, Nan 11's expression was slightly cold. She could even cruelly plot against the unborn child in Chu Hong I's belly. Aren't she and Xian Yuan Yan a perfect match? Thinking of this, she said calmly, I can't interfere too much in the family affairs of the Prince of Wei's mansion. If Madam is really worried, I will send someone to remind the Prince of Wei and his wife to treat Miss Fang well. Is this feasible?